The moment she stepped into the little coffee shop, every conversation seemed to fade into the background. She wasn't crying, she wasn't asking anyone for help, and she wasn't making a scene. She simply stood in the doorway, clutching the tiny hand of a little boy who looked no older than 5, staring around as if she'd forgotten where she belonged. I had no idea that offering her the empty chair across from mine would become the beginning of the most unforgettable day of my life. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe in hope, compassion, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories that remind the world that simple acts of kindness can still change lives. My name is Nathan, and this happened in a quiet neighborhood cafe outside Nashville, Tennessee. Saturday mornings were my escape from the loneliness that had quietly settled into my life after losing both of my parents within 3 years. I worked as an architect, surrounded by blueprints and deadlines all week, but weekends belonged to silence, black coffee, and watching strangers pass by the window. I never imagined that an ordinary morning would rewrite everything I thought I knew about loss, family, and purpose. The young woman finally noticed the empty seat beside my table. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were neat but worn, and the little boy held tightly to her hand without saying a word. I smiled and gently offered the chair, thinking she simply needed a place to rest while waiting for someone. She hesitated for several seconds before accepting. The child sat quietly beside her, resting his head against her arm, as though he had done that 1,000 times before. For several minutes, none of us spoke. She stared at the untouched glass of water the waitress had placed in front of her. The little boy looked around the cafe with wide, curious eyes, smiling politely whenever someone glanced his way. There was something heartbreakingly gentle about him. Then the young woman took a deep breath and quietly thanked me for the seat. She introduced herself as Rachel, and the boy as Caleb. She admitted they had nowhere else to go that morning, after being asked to leave the motel where they had been staying, because they had run out of money. She wasn't asking for help. In fact, she apologized for sitting down at all. I told her there was nothing to apologize for. Everyone deserves a place to catch their breath. She looked at me with eyes filled with both gratitude and fear before saying the words that have stayed with me ever since. She said she wasn't really looking for a chair. She was looking for one person who might still believe she wasn't a failure. Those words landed harder than anything I had heard in years. As we talked, I learned that Rachel had spent months caring for her father during his illness until he passed away. Medical bills had emptied every dollar she had saved. She had worked temporary jobs while raising Caleb alone, moving from one place to another, always believing tomorrow would finally be different. But tomorrow kept becoming another difficult day. I couldn't solve every problem she faced, but I also couldn't pretend I hadn't heard her story. Instead of offering pity, I asked if she would allow me to help her find a more permanent place to stay. I had an old friend named Michael who managed a community housing program connected with several local churches. He believed everyone deserved dignity before judgment. By the end of that afternoon, Rachel and Caleb had a safe apartment for several months, while she searched for steady work. Michael also connected her with childcare assistance and employment counseling. None of it happened because of luck. It happened because compassionate people had quietly built a community that refused to let struggling families disappear. Over the following months, I watched Rachel slowly become someone entirely different. Her shoulders straightened. Her smile returned. Caleb started kindergarten, proudly bringing home drawings that covered every inch of his refrigerator with colorful pictures of houses, trees, and smiling stick figures holding hands. One evening, Rachel invited me to dinner in her small apartment. The meal wasn't expensive, but it felt richer than any restaurant I'd ever visited. Halfway through dessert, Caleb handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing of 3 people standing beneath a bright blue sky. Above us, he had carefully written, in uneven letters, "Thank you for giving Mommy a place to sit." I realized then that I had never really given her a chair. I had simply noticed someone everyone else had walked past. Sometimes, we imagine that changing a life requires extraordinary wealth or impossible sacrifices. But often it begins with noticing someone who feels invisible, listening without judgment, and refusing to believe that another person's hardest season defines who they are forever. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more uplifting stories, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that kindness still exists. Your support allows these messages of hope to reach people who may need them the most. Before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling us about a small act of kindness that changed your life, or one that you hope to pass on to someone else. Your story might become the encouragement another person has been waiting to read. Rachel eventually found a full-time position at a local nonprofit office. Caleb grew into a cheerful little boy surrounded by friends. And every Saturday morning, 3 coffee cups sat on the same table near the cafe window instead of one. Looking back, I often think about how close I came to saying nothing that morning. One empty chair, one simple invitation, and one honest conversation became the beginning of a brand new future for people who simply needed someone to believe they still deserved one. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding the right words. It's making room for someone who thought the world had run out of places for them to belong.